I'm Batman.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Get to the chopper!
Discussing movies, this is Brian's review show.
Well, you did some pushing of your own, John.
They drew first blood, not me.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
We better get back, because it'll be dark soon, and they mostly come at night. Mostly.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Bond. James Bond.
And you're very welcome to Brian's movie review show. On this podcast episode this week, we'll be discussing the classic 1986 film Top Gun, which of course launched the career of actor Tom Cruise. The 1986 film was directed by Tony Scott and produced by Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer in association with Paramount Pictures. The screenplay was written by Jim Cash and Jack Eames Jr. And the film starred Tom Cruise, Kelly McGillis, Val Kilmer, Anthony Edwards, Tom Skerritt, and Michael Ironside. So pretty much phenomenal cast for this classic 80s film. The movie tells the story of a devil-may-care Navy pilot, Pete Mitchell, played by Tom Cruise, who is sent to a naval air station for advanced training. Here he goes up to battle against Iceman for the coveted Top Gun award. With the not-so-occupied, Mitchell carries on a romance with a civilian consultant, Charlotte Blackwood. Shaken up by the death of a friend, Mitchell loses the Top Gun honour to Iceman Kozlowski. Worried that he may have lost his nerve, Mitch is given a chance to redeem himself during a tense international crisis involving a crippled US vessel and a flock of predatory enemy planes. Top Gun was released on May 16, 1986. Upon its release, the film received generally mixed reviews from film critics. 4 weeks after release, the number of theatres showing it increased by 45%. Despite its initial mixed critical reaction, the film was a huge commercial hit, grossing $356 million against a production of $15 million. The film maintained its popularity over the years and earned a re-release back in 2013, a 3D re-release. Additionally, the soundtrack of the film has since become one of the most popular movie soundtracks to date, involving songs like Take My Breath Away by Berlin, and of course Kenny Loggins' two tunes that he contributed to the soundtrack, Playing with the Boys and Danger Zone. Take My Breath Away would later go on to win numerous awards, sending the band to international acclaim, and after the release of Loggins' single Danger Zone, sales of the album exploded, selling 7 million in the United States alone. Now, where do you start with this iconic film? Now, the reason I'm doing this film, I'll be also, my next podcast episode will be doing the sequel, Top Gun Maverick, which I'll be going to see this week. So I said I'd go back and rewatch the original film. I've seen the original film many times, but not in a few years. So I decided to go back and rewatch it there over the last couple of days, and it's still just a classic 80s film. Launched, as I said, the career of Tom Cruise. Just it's got that 1980s vibe to it. The music, the setting, the cinematography, just even the dialogue itself is just, and the haircuts and everything about it screams 1980s. And there's a reason why it was the biggest hit of 1986. It's just, it captured a moment in time, I think, in culture, certainly in cinema, and as I said, particularly in pop culture, it just captured that moment in time of the 1980s. A film that maybe somehow, maybe if other people got involved in it, mightn't have worked as well, but just certain films just capture magic in essence, and this film just, really delivered on everything it promised, from the whole storyline to the special effects to the music to the aircraft sequences, all top drawer stuff, like it really is. I would be certainly a big Tom Cruise fan. I like most of his films, but Top Gun is certainly up there. It is most iconic, and probably the one when I think of Tom Cruise, Top Gun is the one that comes to mind straight away. It launched, in fairness to his career, he had Risky Business in 1993, and he had The Outsiders, which is a very good film as well. And then Outsiders was with Francis Ford Coppola, of course, the Godfather director. He went on then to make Legend with Ridley Scott, and the following year then he made Top Gun with Tony Scott, Ridley Scott's brother. And of course, he made Colour of Money with Martin Scorsese in the same year. I think 1986 was a pivotal year for Tom Cruise's career, because from there on, he was in hit after hit. And, Top Gun gave him that platform to build on what the phenomenal career he's had since. Even his persona in this film, Lieutenant Pete Maverick Mitchell, is that whole character is you can mash his characters in Cocktail and in Days of Thunder and even possibly Jerry Maguire, and just kind of merge them into one kind of film. It captures that whole Tom Cruise character is captured in this film, and a brilliant film. Even the co-stars in the film, Kelly McGillis, who plays Charlie, who becomes Maverick's partner in the film. She's adds an awful lot to this film. Kelly McGillis is a terrific actress as well. She was in two other iconic films in the 80s, not just Top Gun, although Top Gun is high up on that list as well. The year before Top Gun, she was in a film called Witness with Harrison Ford, which is a phenomenal film, and she's terrific in that film as well. And then she went on to be in a film called The Accused, which was with Jodie Foster in 1988 as well. She was in other films along the way as well, Med in Heaven and The House on Carroll Street. But I think the one that when people think of Kelly McGillis, certainly Witness, I think, could be up there as well. But Top Gun, in terms of pop culture, she's very much high up on that list of contributors to why this film is just a classic. Val Kilmer, I think, possibly steals the show in this film. He plays Lieutenant Tom Iceman Kozowski, one of Top Gun's students and Maverick's rival turned wingman. And the interesting thing is that Val Kilmer actually originally didn't want the role in this film, but was persuaded to take on the role. Great, listen, another classy performance. Literally ice cool in the film, Val Kilmer, and you can sense the rivalry between him and Cruise during the film as well, and the lines and everything. Anthony Edwards is Goose, Nick Bradshaw, and he is Maverick's best friend and co-pilot as well, and a radar intercept officer. And Anthony Edwards is another class actor as well. He was in Revenge of the Nerds, and of course later went on to be a big part of one of the biggest shows ever. Certainly back in the 90s was ER, but other people before that would have, of course, remember him in this film Top Gun, and he adds again to the quality of this film. A character I really love in the film, and after going back rewatching it again, I realised how much I liked him even more in the film, was Tom Skerritt's character, and he played Mike Viper Madcliffe, the commanding officer and instructor of Top Gun. And he is a veteran of the Vietnam War who served with Duke Mitchell, who was Maverick's father. Now, in the film, Maverick goes through a period where he's kind of self-doubt about himself, and he goes to Viper's house. And just that whole scene, the cinematography, the dialogue even is its top drawer. The whole Viper character who kind of ensures and reassures Maverick, Tom Cruise's character, about his father was a brave man, and this information I'm about to give you is classified, that your father was not the coward that some people painted him to be, that he was a true hero, true pioneer. And that whole scene outside Viper's house, and just the whole kind of emotional aspect that's built up in that scene, from Goose's death a couple of scenes before that, and you follow Maverick's kind of decline really in character and his own confidence, and just the way he deals with his best friend's death, and his self-confidence is very much damaged from the flight that happened before that with the tailspin and everything. So he goes to Viper for some words of advice, and I think that's that scene alone is one of the highlights of the film for me, and just shows Tom Cruise emerging as a great actor. Tom Skerritt, of course, is another brilliant actor. Phenomenal performance in Alien as well. 7 years before that in 1979, so you're going to get a pretty good performance from him in this film, and he adds an awful lot to, again, like the actors I've mentioned so far, they just add so much to the quality of this film and why it was the big success it was. Michael Ironside is another actor that he plays Rick Jester Heatherly, who's the naval aviator and a Top Gun instructor, and he adds just his whole catalogue of going to Maverick, saying that's some of the the best fucking flying I've ever seen, and it also was some of the most stupidest flying I've ever seen. It was just the way he came up to Cruise and just said that in that scene. And it was a brilliant acting from Michael Ironside, it must be said. Um, like they're kind of, and Meg Ryan, of course, is in the film as well. She plays Goose's wife in the film, and she plays a pivotal role in the background of Goose's character and also Maverick's character too, because she knows Maverick for a lot of years. Um, and she is in the film. She plays Carol Bradshaw, who is Goose's wife. And a fact, actually, I knew about, but I kind of, when I watched it again, I realized that Tim Robbins is also in the film as well. Tim Robbins, of course, went on to direct the Shawshank Redemption and Mystic River, but he's in this film too. He plays Merlin, who is Cougar's Radar Intercept Officer, and later Mavericks in the film as well. So it's just, pretty good cast to have in a film like this. But like when you go through the film, just the aerial shots in the film just stand out probably the most when people kind of think of Top Gun. Of course, the one-liners too. I feel the need for speed. That kind of stuff is just pretty good. Lines to it, but it's interesting in my research of the film that I noticed that most of the sequences of the aircraft maneuvering overland were actually shot in Nevada and using ground-mounted cameras. But when I watched Top Gun first, I immediately liked the film. I love that 80s kind of vibe to it. The dialogue in it is terrific. The chemistry between Goose and Maverick, Anthony Edwards and Tom Cruise in the film is pretty top notch. Tom Skerritt's character Viper, and also Michael Ironside's character Jester. I think I love the whole presence they have in the film, and they're kind of in the backdrop of what's going on in Maverick's life. Kelly McGillis is a terrific actress and a terrific performance as Charlie, and I always go back and watch Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, two brilliant American critics, and there's hundreds of clips of them on YouTube, and for me, they're the gods of film critics. I love going back when I watch an old film like Top Gun, for example. I always like going back to see what they had to say at the time when the film was released, because they were the gurus and people, millions tuned in America at the time to see what they thought of the film. And when I was reading and listening to the review that they made about the film, the interesting thing that they said, which they both agreed with, but I'd have to disagree with, is that they thought that Kelly McGillis and Tom Cruise didn't have much chemistry in the film, and I'd have to disagree. I think there is for sure chemistry between the two, and it kind of builds up over time, and the whole this iconic scenes in the film between Cruise on the bike, and he's fist pumping the plane as it's going flying in the background, or the classic scene when they're in the bar, Goose and Maverick, and they sing the classic Righteous Brothers song, You've Lost That Love and Feeling, which becomes the love theme, I suppose, in the film as well. And she's also part of the Great Balls of Fire scene, when they're singing that Jerry Lee Lewis classic, that bar scene. She's in the background of that as well. And just the scenes, particularly after rewatching the film, the scenes with those two together in her home place, and just even the car sequence as well, when she had to say that she couldn't say Maverick's flying was some of the bravest flying or genius flying I've ever seen. She couldn't say that in front of the class. That scene, that whole tension there's obvious chemistry between the two of them. And I absolutely adore Siskel and Ebert, but I just thought when they said that at the time, I was like, really? I was like, there's obvious chemistry between the two, and they're part of the magic of this film. She's there. She's the support for Maverick's network, and he has constant self-doubt about himself because the reputation that his father had and what happened with his father. He is a brave flyer, but Iceman says to Maverick that he's also the most dangerous, and none of the guys on the ground particularly like him either. And you could read more into that, but the whole chemistry between McGillis and Cruise it's evident throughout the film. There's no question about it. As soon as you come across her for the first time, there's instant chemistry there. The whole sequences of them together, the scenes they have together, even the elevator scene that they have as well. And she, when you go back to the scene when they're in the house, Cruise, Maverick talks about his father, and even just listen to old music and how that music stems memories back of his childhood. Great, great scenes. Like, adds to the quality of the film. It's like the biggest compliment I can give to Top Gun. It's so rewatchable as a film. Like, I've watched Top Gun possibly 3-4 times in my lifetime, and and I'll probably watch it again too, no doubt. But it's just like the whole, like, yeah, the aerial sequences are fantastic and add so much to the quality of the film. But the chemistry and the performances of the actors in the film adds to it as well. Um, just some great scenes in the film, great dialogue, and the whole, like, it's a lot of Hollywood in there too. Like, of course, filmmaking, you have to add a bit of that to it as well. But that's what adds to it. The whole, sequence when Maverick finally discovers that Charlie, the girl he was chatting to the night before, is actually his instructor at Top Gun. Just adds that bit of um, drama and everything towards it. And just the whole, even the banter and the between the Maverick and Iceman and Goose as well, and also Rick Rosvich's character Slider, which is of course the intercept officer for Iceman as well. So just that whole bantering and everything that's going on there. Um, just such a rewatchable film. It really is. It's the biggest compliment you can give it. Um, John Stockwell, who plays Cougar in the film, he's Maverick's former wingman. It's just the way Cougar. This is at the start of the film when Cougar kind of loses his way. That's kind of that's the genius maybe of Tony Scott, that he shows a glimpse of what Maverick will be like later in the film. When he's kind of doubting himself, because Maverick is so confident at the start of the film because he's Goose's mate beside him, his best friend, and then when that tragic accident happens later in the film, Maverick's confidence is tested and he freezes in the air and causes a fight with his wingman and all this kind of stuff. And that whole build up and that whole filmmaking style, it's part of the genius that was the late great Tony Scott. And another great character in the film is also James Tolkien's character. He plays Stinker Tom Jardin, who is the commander of the USS Enterprise carrier air group. And he's like, at the end of the film, he says to Maverick, he says, "You're going to come back and be an instructor at Top Gun. God help us." It's just it's brilliant acting on his part. And he's, saying, you're representing the best here, going into Top Gun school and all this. So it's just some great, such likable characters in the film. And and I think, like, the scene when, like, there's a lot of emotion in the film too. The scenes with Charlie and Maverick when they're talking about Maverick's dad, and then when Goose has that tragic accident and all that, and then you see Goose's wife again, and then Maverick, picks up his bits and sees her for the first time since Goose died. It's such an emotional scene for an action film at that time. It was just, it was really hit the nail on the head really at the time. What you were feeling, you felt terribly what happened to Goose because he was such a likable character, and when that happened to him, and then Maverick's reaction, and he causes self doubt. But in that scene with Meg Ryan and Cruise when they're reacting to Goose's death, there's terrific acting from both of them. Like, Meg Ryan is brilliant in the film. She's only in for a couple of scenes in the film, but she adds a lot to the quality. She kind of gives a background to Maverick, to Charlie. When they're in the bar, she's kind of talking about Maverick's previous dates, and Penny Benjamin was the name that's mentioned, and Penny Benjamin actually comes up later in the sequel, which we'll talk more into when I see the new one. But just like, I think a film that's gained more fans, I think, over the years for sure. And I know, like, there's no question it launched the career of Tom Cruise, because after this, Tom Cruise became a mega star in movies. He went on there to, The Color of Money that year, and then he met Rain Man, which became the best picture of 1988. We had Cocktail, which is another lovable cruise film. Born the 4th of July, he went on to make these Days of Thunder, The Firm, Jerry Maguire, went further and further, and then Mission Impossible down the line then as well. Well, the platform was set and built on Top Gun from that success because it became the biggest film of 1986. Huge film, $330 million earned from a $50 million budget. It's a phenomenally successful film. There's no two ways about it, and we're still talking about it. 1986 it came out, so you're talking 36 years later since the original came out. There's been a huge uptake and interest in it again because of the sequel that's coming out, that's been gaining momentum and great reviews. And well, as I said, I'll give my opinion on it when I go and see it this week. But it is a classic of the 1980s. The soundtrack, as I've talked about there, Kenny Loggins is a brilliant singer. He did Footloose, and he did One Fine Day later on with George Clooney, and he also did Candy Shack as well, and he also did a soundtrack to Rocky IV the previous year, so he was the man for films. But his songs in Top Gun are so iconic, particularly Danger Zone is such an iconic song. When you hear that song straight away, you immediately think of the opening sequence to Top Gun, and then Playing with the Boys, then that's the sequence then when they're playing volleyball on the beach and stuff. Just cheesy, yes. Erotic, probably yes. Iconic, absolutely. And Take My Breath Away by Berlin, which was a massive hit when it came out in 1986, went on to win the Academy Award for Best Original Song, as well as the Golden Globe Award for Best Original Song in 1986. And it is a cracking tune, and it's the love theme again that's built along with the Righteous Brothers song, Take My Breath Away. They're both iconic songs in their own right. But phenomenal. The reason Top Gun soundtrack is sold so well is because it's a damn good fucking soundtrack, and each song contributes to. Again, I can't emphasize enough that it contributes to the quality and the iconicness of this movie. And the whole redemption then of Maverick, and the famous scene then when Iceman says to Maverick, you are still dangerous, but you can be my wingman anytime. And then Maverick says, bullshit, you can be mine. And then that whole sequence is just it's iconic. Like, that's the word to describe it. It is iconic. It is quotable. It is part of the reason Cruise had such a phenomenal career. But Top Gun is quintessentially an 80s film, and in every best way possible. It has the cheese, it has the music, it has the setting, the dialogue, you name it, it's got it. And the scenes I actually chuckle at when I think about Top Gun as well is the scenes when he does the flyby. He requests Tower, this is Ghost Rider requesting a flyby, and negative, Ghost Rider, and then he has the cup of coffee in his hand, and then he flies by then and he spills the coffee. Gets an earful, of course, from Jester as well, Maverick and Goose. But it's just, and then what I love about it then later on, it's so Hollywood, but I fucking love it. It's brilliant. But when he flies by again later in the film, and your man still spills the coffee again, it's just fucking, it's brilliantly done. It's Top Gun is a feel good film. That's part of the genius of it. When you watch it, it's the redemption story, the conflict, the rags to riches, that kind of stuff. It's all part of the lore of Top Gun. Yeah, just as I always do at every Brian movie review show, I always like to do some trivia facts, and here's just some trivia facts about Top Gun. The real Top Gun school imposes a $5 fine to any staff member that quotes the film, which is an interesting one. And also, when the students are being briefed by Charlie in the hangar, Maverick explains that he gave the bird to an MiG. She asks how he saw the MiG up close, and then he says he was flying inverted. Right then, Ice coughs, bullshit. And the guys laughed. The bullshit line was actually ad-libbed by Val Kilmer, and everyone's reaction is actually very genuine, which I didn't know. Val Kilmer did not want to be in the film, but was forced to by a contract obligation. However, it became one of his most iconic roles in his career. Anthony Edwards is the only actor who didn't vomit while in the fighter jets. And riding on the back of the film's success, the US Navy set up recruiting booths in the major cinemas to try and catch some of the adrenaline charged guys leaving the screens. They had the highest applications rate for years as a result. The character portrayed by Kelly McGillis is based on Christian Fox, a civilian flight instructor. The producers met her on a visit to Miramar while doing research to prepare for the film. Fox eventually rose through the ranks at the Pentagon, retiring in May 2014 as Acting Deputy Secretary of Defense, the highest post ever held by a woman at the Department of Defense. The tension between Maverick and Iceman isn't just down to good acting. Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer kept their distance from each other and never socialized together. Jerry Bruckheimer on convincing Tom Cruise to sign on to the film after its initial reluctance. So the Navy take Tom up there and they do 5Gs. They do barrel rolls, they do everything. He's heaving in the plane. He gets on the tarmac, runs to a payphone, and he said, "I'm in, I'm doing the movie. I love it. This is great." Michael Ironside stated in the DVD commentary of the film that he was so convincing as an officer that when he heard someone running towards him below the decks, he got on to the sailor who was running. The sailor saluted and slowed down until he got off Ironside's line of sight and started running again. The sailor never knew that Ironside was an actor for the film. Now, Matthew Modine turned down the role of Maverick because he objected to the film's Cold War politics. Patrick Swayze, Emilio Estevez, Nicolas Cage, John Cusack, Matthew Broderick, Sean Penn, Michael J. Fox, and Tom Hanks all turned down the role. Janet Graham, Charlie Sheen, Jim Carrey, Rob Lowe, Kevin Bacon, and Robert Downey Jr. were considered for the role. Sheen, who was deemed too young for the role, would later go on to spoof the role in the comedy Hot Shots back in 1991. Tom Cruise had never ridden a motorcycle until this film. He went on to House of Motorcycles in California to learn. They taught him in the parking lot of their shop. The Pentagon actually charged Paramount Pictures $1.8 million to use all of their planes and aircraft carriers for the film. The film was inspired by an article in the May 1983 issue of California magazine about the US Navy's Top Gun school. A test audience who saw the movie before it was released were annoyed that there was no love scene. The producers obliged, and 5 months after the production had wrapped, they summoned Tom Cruise and Kelly McGillis to Chicago to film the infamous elevator scene and then the sex scene. During their time away from the set, McGillis had lost approximately 16 pounds, and Cruise was actually filming The Colour Money, so his hair was much longer in those two scenes. McGillis's hair was also much darker, hence why she hid it underneath a cap in the elevator scene. A script for Top Gun 2 was completed shortly after the release of the film, but it broke down in pre-production because the military's technology had become updated and they didn't want camera crew anywhere near their new aircraft, and Tom Cruise did not want a sequel and finally agreed to star in one for a very high amount that was deemed unaffordable. The script followed the further adventures of Maverick as an instructor at the Top Gun Academy, the twist being a cocky female reminiscent of himself joining the team. Bryan Adams was asked to allow his song Only the Strong Survive on the soundtrack, but he refused because he felt the film glorified war. And the film is actually credited with starting the home video industry. Originally, VHS tapes were priced at $100 upon their first release and were sold mainly to video stores. The film was priced to own immediately upon release, made possible by Pepsi Cola buying ad space at the beginning of the tape. Since then, pricing VHS tapes to own right away became a common practice during this time. And Anthony Edwards had no idea he was going to sing and pretend to play piano in one scene. Tony Scott was listening to Jerry Lewis that morning and added it in the last minute. So yes, Top Gun, definitely one of the classics for sure of the decade of the 1980s. Classy film in terms of the rags to riches stories I already said. The whole characters are so likable. Maverick, Goose, Iceman, Charlie, Viper, Jester, all very, likable characters. Pretty good acting too throughout the film. Some, I suppose, career-defining scenes in some ways, and definitely pop culture-defining scenes throughout the film as well. Just classic one-liners and the whole bear scene and all the flight scenes and everything. They're all iconic in their own way. So that's why it's still remembered. It was released in 1996, and now it's finally produced a sequel after 36 years. I will have my next movie podcast review show will have be focusing on the sequel to Top Gun Maverick. So I'm hoping that it lives up to the hype that the original film created, because the original film is a classic and always will be a classic, no matter the quality of the sequel, if it's good or bad. But if you haven't seen Top Gun, definitely give it a watch. And if you have seen it and think you need to watch it before you go and watch the sequel, I would suggest definitely go back and rewatch it, because it just I learned a bit more from going back rewatching it again. So it's just a classic film from the 1980s, and one that's always a good rewatch no matter when you go back and watch it. And that concludes this podcast episode reviewing the classic 86 film Top Gun. All our podcasts, of course, are available. You'll be able to find them on wherever you get your podcasts from. We have a YouTube channel, of course, called Brian's Review Show. All episodes of previous films are up on that channel, so you can check out that. And also you can check out the podcast on Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, Amazon Music, and Acast. And we're also on Twitter as well. So you'll have plenty of an opportunity to check out all previous episodes. I appreciate any comments and likes and shares, and you're very welcome to contribute in that front as well. But hope you enjoyed today's podcast, and we'll definitely see you on the next one. Enjoy the movies, and all the best.
I'm Batman.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Get to the chopper!
Discussing movies, this is Brian's Review Show.
Well, you did some pushing of your own, John.
They drew first blood, not me.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
We better get back, because it'll be dark soon, and they mostly come at night. Mostly.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Bond. James Bond.